Morning, Kirsty. I think there'll be plenty of time for us to pore over the detail about how much of what we did was worth it or not. I think the focus right now, must be on trying to protect those that are still able to get out, who are at serious risk from having supported us and other coalition and government or non-government organisations, particularly, who are very vulnerable in Kabul as we speak, trying to find ways out and to keep their families safe. That has got to be the focus, and that's what we need governments around the world to do, is to focus on trying to help people out, because it's desperate. Your scenes there at the airport from yesterday and other videos from last night are desperate, really desperate.
Ash, the terrifying thing is that the only people who seem to be really surprised by what's happened are those who made the decision that led to it.
Well, I'm not sure anybody's surprised, really, if one looks at it in any level of depth. If one pulls the rug out so precipitously from people who've relied on us, but right or wrong, for so many years, I think we shouldn't be surprised that there would be an issue, and the vacuum that has been left has clearly been filled by others.
Ash, just if you wouldn't mind, just describing your experience of being in Afghanistan, of fighting there over a period of time. I believe you were injured as well. Could you just take us back?
I mean, I went back and forth to Afghanistan for nearly 4 years over a period of over 10 years because I love the people and the country, and felt that there was so much we can and could do to help them find a better, more positive path than clearly had been possible under the Taliban. So it's tragic, and it's very upsetting to see for people like me and my friends and colleagues, both here and still in Afghanistan, to see how quickly things have unravelled. But we have a duty to them to try and continue to support them. We gave women and girls particularly a hope and dreams that the future would be different. And overnight, just catching up this morning on texts and messages from friends of former government employees in Kabul, they are absolutely terrified that some have had to split their families up, so that if the Taliban were to come to their house and catch them, or find that they are there and they were influential, that maybe there's a chance that not everybody in the family would be taken, or their reprisals would be carried out. And others are just in hiding, hoping that they can make the cut when the flights, if any flights are able to leave, do. Otherwise, they have no real hope of what their future looks like in the immediate term. And women and girls, we're already hearing, are being stopped from going to work, barred from going to schools and universities in some parts of the country. So I don't think we should be seduced by the rhetoric coming out of Doha from the propagandists about a new Taliban, a more inclusive Taliban. It's the same movie we've seen before. This is just the trailer, and if we kid ourselves and continue with rhetoric about we must make sure they understand that we don't want to see violence and they must protect human rights, I think we're missing the point. For those on the ground, it doesn't matter. We need to act.
Well, you say we need to act, and the Prime Minister's recalled Parliament, but frankly, the Taliban have won. We've lost. There are now real fears that those that you care about, those that worked with the allies during the war, are now going to be targeted. There's also a fear of terrorism coming to the streets of the West. I mean, this couldn't be a worse scenario.
Yeah, it's clearly an extremely fragile and volatile period at the moment. I won't comment on any particular government, other than there are some governments around the world who've recognised that the time is now if we are going to act before it's too late, and they have opened up their policies to enable the most inclusive number of people to be extracted, and then the processing can happen in slower time. Canada and Pakistan have both made statements that we can't just continue with the same process that was put in place, or the policy for determining who is eligible that was put in place many weeks or months ago. The timeline is moving much faster than many governments are able to keep up with. So we just need to try and help as many people as we can now before it's too late.
And just being totally brutally honest, Ash, you know the Taliban. What is your biggest fear, would you say now?
As I said, I think we've seen this movie before. They are a fundamentalist terrorist organisation, and any legitimising of their government, whatever that looks like, is likely to allow Afghanistan once again to become a safe haven, not only for their ideology, but as we've seen last night, I've seen reporting that not only did they release all the prisoners out of big prisons in Kandahar and elsewhere, but up in Bagram, Parwan, there are 5,000 to 7,000 fighters or prisoners that have been released, many of whom were hardcore Al-Qaeda and ISIS, Daesh prisoners. So they will do deals with whoever it makes sense to do deals with at the time, and the vacuum that we are leaving is extremely concerning.
Why were people so surprised at the speed with which the Taliban took over, do you think?
I think the surprise came by dint of how quickly the leadership, the highest level leadership of all the security apparatus and the government capitulated or left without a fight. And there's a lot of conjecture as to how many deals might have been struck over weeks and months preceding the events over the weekend. But without strong leadership that can inspire its people, it's hardly surprising that the lower echelons of the forces and the police and others that we've spent so long training just felt that they didn't want to be on the receiving end of the retribution and repercussions that would likely or absolutely will come and have already come. The numbers of targeted killings are already up, and it's not just the Taliban. Friends of mine reporting overnight are saying that not only Taliban patrols in the streets, but also criminal gangs are taking advantage of the vacuum and the opportunity presented for them to do things.
And Ash, after spending 20 years there, the US, the British troops, why wasn't there, can you believe, rather, there wasn't a better strategy in place rather than Biden just pulling all troops out and the British coming out as well? Why wasn't there a better strategy?
Well, I think there was always going to need to be a withdrawal. It's just how should and could that withdrawal have been conducted better? I think, I've already alluded to the speed at which all the key specialist and technical support that on which the government had been relying was put in repercussions that would likely or absolutely will come and have already come. The numbers of targeted killings are already up, and it's not just the Taliban. Friends of mine reporting overnight are saying that not only Taliban patrols in the streets, but also criminal gangs are taking advantage of the vacuum and the opportunity presented for them to do things.
And Ash, after spending 20 years there, the US, the British troops, why wasn't there, can you believe, rather, there wasn't a better strategy in place rather than Biden just pulling all troops out and the British coming out as well? Why wasn't there a better strategy?
Well, I think there was always going to need to be a withdrawal. It's just how should and could that withdrawal have been conducted better? I think, I've already alluded to the speed at which all the key specialist and technical support that on which the government had been relying was pulled, not necessarily overnight, but it felt certainly overnight to those who were used to air support when they were in contact with Taliban and other fighters. So I think, we've seen in other countries, one could hypothetically and reality have an enduring presence that's with a lighter footprint, and that could be affordable and enduring until we were confident that a full withdrawal would not lead to this. But I think having such a precipitous pullout of everything that mattered to them has certainly been an ingredient in what we're seeing now take place.
454 British troops lost their lives, many, including yourself, injured, some with very life-changing injuries. What for?
I think, as I said, there'll be plenty of time for people to pore over the detail and determine what or what wasn't worth it. I think we must also, clearly our focus should be with the Afghans who are suffering at the moment, and 71,000 Afghan civilians have been killed since 2001. We mustn't forget that. They have suffered the bulk of the challenge here and the loss. But I do think we must think of the families of those who've lost loved ones and the veterans who have been suffering mentally or physically since they served. And we mustn't do anything that's going to further sort of increase the angst and the fears they have or the issues they may have in justifying their own actions and the losses that they suffered or saw at first hand. Otherwise, we'll see another spike, perhaps in, I hope I'm not proved right, but I do worry that there could be a concomitant increase in suicides or certainly challenging times for those who have been suffering the most since they returned from their service.
You use one word on Twitter last night to describe all this. That word was terrifying, but perhaps understates it.
Well, the terrifying word I used was to talk about that release of 5,000 to 7,000 Al-Qaeda and ISIS prisoners. That is terrifying. I think we have no sense of where they will go, what they will do. I think all we can be sure of is that they haven't given up their fight and their ideology. So we have plenty of time potentially in the West to look at what we did or what we've decided to allow to happen, and the risk to us in the West and those who seek to have liberal Western democracies that are fair and inclusive are at risk of further insurgent or terrorist activities if we're not very, very careful.
OK, well, Ash Alexander Cooper, former Specialist Military Unit Colonel in the British Armed Forces, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning.